Citrix-as-a-Service is really a way to think about deploying Citrix Workspace in a way that's more flexible, meaning we have options about where we deploy the management plane, which are all the parts and pieces that the administrators deal with, and the resource plane, which is the desktops, applications, and data that our users connect to. With being able to leverage on-premises deployments or cloud, we have a lot of flexibility in the way that we do that and bring those resources to our end users. So let's start with a traditional deployment here and see what that looks like. And then from there, we'll branch out and define some of these components, hopefully in a way that makes it easier for you to understand. Now, in a traditional deployment, we always start with the user. So we want to be able to provide the user access to resources from the devices that they have. So if they have a desktop, a tablet, a smartphone, they need access to the virtual desktops, the applications, and the data for day-to-day business. They use these on a daily basis, and really what we're trying to do is provide that digital workspace in a way that removes the burden from the user trying to have to understand, okay, what device do I have? Am I on the corporate network? What am I trying to access? Do I need a full desktop? Do I just need application, or do I need specific data? And make that simpler for them regardless of what device they have and where they're at. Now, along with that, obviously, with that workspace environment to run those virtual desktops, applications, and data, we need underlying infrastructure. So we need servers, we need storage, we need network to power those components and make them run. And those really all together are what we're going to refer to as the resource plane. So the underlying infrastructure that runs those virtual desktops, applications, data that really build out the Citrix workspace, and from a user's perspective is where they connect. So these are the actual desktops and applications where they connect to, not necessarily the management plane, which we'll see here in a minute. So it's just those user resources. And so if we look at this, obviously we have users that connect internally, but we can also have those same users connect externally. So if we have an external user with a laptop, they can connect in through a NetScaler outside the corporate firewall, reach and connect those same resources. And again, that goes back to our previous point where we're simplifying access for a user. Whether I'm an internal user or external user, I don't have to think about where I'm at, what type of device I have. The applications work the same as they would there. I can connect to Storefront and access all of those different components. Now, along with that, we need to think about the admin perspective. So an administrator has to make sure all of these components run. There's a number of services that actually support that Citrix Workspace environment. So things like Storefront, a license server, Active Directory, director, delivery controllers, database, all those types of things that an admin is responsible for. And not only are they responsible for those individual components, but the underlying infrastructure that runs this component, which we're going to call the management plane. So we're kind of separating these pieces really into the management plane where the admin connects to and manages resources, and the other component where the user actually accesses these components. And this will really help us to understand not only traditional on-premises Zen Desktop, Zen App workspace environments, but when we start to talk about Citrix as a service, what that really means. So if we think of this, again, in an on-premises infrastructure, these are customer managed on-premises resources. So the admin has to take care of all the infrastructure and resources for the management plane. The user connects to the resource plane in that regard. Now, what if we can start to leverage cloud components and actually leverage Citrix expertise in this scenario? And what that would mean is when we talk about Citrix as a service, or more commonly generally called Citrix Cloud, we're actually taking that management plane and Citrix is providing it as a managed service. So their administrators, their infrastructure run all of those components. The storefront service, the database, the license server, they manage and maintain those components and make sure they're up to date, make sure they work well together, make sure they have high availability, meet SLAs and those types of things. And that really alleviates the burden on the administrator and simplifies their day-to-day work and allows us to be effective with how quickly we can deploy those desktops. Now, the way that this works is with the cloud connectors. You see here, the cloud connector is a small virtual machines, or usually group of multiple machines that resides in that resource plane. So where we have the infrastructure that runs the virtual machines, applications, and data, and that connects back to that cloud management plane that Citrix manages. And again, what this provides us in this scenario is really a way to provide local execution of those virtual machines, applications, and data so that the user has good access to those. But then it also allows the administrator to log into the cloud management plane and administer the desktops, do the day-to-day things that they need to do, while Citrix manages those underlying updates and security and different components in that regard. So again, we're really taking away that burden of having to have the on-premises infrastructure for the management plane, though we may still have something like hyper-converged infrastructure like Nutanix in the resource plane. And again, that provides us local proximity to the user. They can access desktops and get that quick responsiveness that they're used to, and we don't have to maintain both of those pieces. So again, contrasting that with the all on-premises piece, this is kind of the second option. But what if we move that management plane back to our on-premises piece, and we're going to look at a scenario which we call extend. So this is kind of the opposite, where we're going to take those virtual machines, applications, and data and move them out to a public cloud resource. In this scenario, the user then connects to those resources in a public cloud, and where we'd really see this is maybe for seasonal retail. So say you have a retail business that from October to January is extra busy, we're going to bring on additional workers, but we don't want to have on-premises infrastructure that we own after that seasonal sales cycle is over. So this way we could spin things up in Azure and connect back to our on-premises Citrix environment where we have our traditional desktops, and we can deploy out into the cloud. And this gives us the benefit, sort of a burst capability. Maybe in this scenario, we still have on-premises desktops that we use for our core business, but we can also extend out into any of these public cloud services, meaning Azure, AWS, and a variety of other services. Citrix has really done a lot of work with Microsoft in making Azure best of breed, but we can leverage any of these components. Now, again, it's important to realize in this scenario, even though that resource plane is in the cloud, it is still customer managed. So we're having virtual machines running out in the cloud. We still need to manage those. This is not a Citrix service. The only part that is a Citrix service is the Citrix Cloud, or we sometimes term it Workspace service, Zen Desktop service. You'll see those items there. So this play really makes us think about the resource plane, its burst capability, or maybe we see that there's value in this and we can only have desktops running at certain times. We can leverage those public cloud services in that regard. So again, contrasting that back again with the traditional all on-premises deployment. The second piece was the management plane in the cloud, the resource plane on the on-premises, and now we're kind of flipping that around again. Now we look at a final scenario where we can actually move both the management plane and the resource plane out into the cloud and have no infrastructure on premises. So we're using that Citrix management plane where they are maintaining the underlying databases, all the services needed for that Citrix environment, and the admin simply needs to do the management that they do on a day-to-day basis with the images, with the deployment of desktops. But at the same time, now we can leverage those public cloud services and spin up desktops as we need to. We don't have to have any on-premises infrastructure. So again, contrasting all these four different scenarios, you can see where depending on how you mix or match those services, we get different benefits from those. And it's really, as a customer, you have to decide, what do you want to manage? Do you have an existing on-premises environment where you want to do that? Maybe you want to burst and have your desktops run in the cloud. Do you have a lot of management headaches where you want Citrix to manage and maintain that and keep your management plane up to date? We can move that into the cloud. We see that as Workspace service, Zen Desktop service, Zen App service, and that's where that management plane is maintained by Citrix. Or do we want to move everything out into the cloud and not have any on-premises infrastructure? And then we can kind of add the fifth option there is we can actually mix and match many of these. So 4 different scenarios, maybe different business units or different projects, we can move these pieces around and be really flexible with that. So that's really where Citrix Workspace and really, again, our air quotes here, but Citrix-as-a-Service comes to play here. Is when you hear the term Citrix Cloud, that's what we mean. We have many options in the way we deploy this. You just have to kind of understand the benefits to each of these and how we want to be flexible in deploying that environment. So now hopefully you can see that the term Citrix-as-a-Service is really synonymous with Citrix Cloud. Having the understanding that Citrix provides a managed control plane where if we choose to leverage their service, we can then connect that to our on-premises desktops or to public desktops in the cloud. And with that, we still have the option of doing an on-premises deployment for that management plane. So once we understand that we've got a management plane where the administrators connect to, we've got a resource plane where our users access their virtual desktops, applications, and data, that we really have choice and different benefits for each of those scenarios. So again, contrasting with an on-premises deployment where the management plane and the resource plane are on premises, completely managed by you as the customer. From there, we can move into the Citrix-as-a-Service or Citrix Cloud world, where we're taking that administrative piece, the management plane, and moving that into the Citrix Cloud, meaning that Citrix manages those resources. Our administrators can still connect to that and access that as they would. And then from there, we can choose, again, where do we deploy those desktops? Do we continue to have them in close proximity to the user on premises, maybe using something like hyperconverged infrastructure like Nutanix, and making that simple and still giving that highly performant workloads close to those users? Or do we move that into the cloud and have that in something like best of breed Azure, where we can easily spin those up maybe for seasonal workloads? And really we can do all of the above. I think it's really most beneficial when we start to see the management plane move out to the cloud. That alleviates the burden on those administrators from the upkeep and day-to-day work. And then from there, we can have a mix of those on-premises workloads or move things into the cloud and be really flexible with the way they deploy that. So thanks for joining us today. I hope to see you next time.